Yes, Australia is about to get a brand new airline, and yes, that is correct. It is going to be called Koala Airlines. But even before Koala Airlines has taken off, the odds here in the Australian market are really stacked against them. And in this quick video, I want to explain to you why that is. So Koala Airlines recently announced that they were going to be operating here in the Australian market, with the objective being redefining air travel, which is great, right? I mean, we need a shake-up of the Australian air travel market here. We've had Qantas and Virgin having a bit of a duopoly for probably far too long. Better routings and better pricing options for customers can only be a good thing, but is Koala Airlines the right company to provide that shake-up? Let's dive into everything you need to know about the brand new Koala Airlines, I love saying that name, and what it means for aviation here down under. So Koala Airlines is based here in Melbourne. It was formed in 2018 through the acquisition of a charter and air tours company, which was called Desert Air Safaris, which used to fly DC-3s on tourist trips around here in Australia. They started in the 1970s and had been flying in Australia for 50 years before being acquired by Koala. Now, Koala Airlines do have a management team in place, which is run by a guy called Bill Asting. He's the CEO of the company, and the rest of the management team is being put together slowly, which is probably why they are using this stock footage image on their website right now. That's an image that you can also see on this project management website, also on this stock footage image search for Angry Business Meeting, and on various Indian news websites for some reason. So the management team is still being put together. But whilst they're doing that, what routes are Koala Airlines actually going to be flying? Well, the trouble is we don't know at the moment. In fact, little is known about the routes that they are going to be operating. Now, you could assume that maybe they're going to try and take over where Rex tried but actually failed recently, which is providing primary jet routes between the major capital cities here in Australia. That's Melbourne to Sydney, the second busiest air route anywhere in the world. Sydney to Brisbane, perhaps. Or maybe they're going to go for the Bonza model. Again, another airline that tried and unfortunately was unsuccessful here in the Australian market, and not focused so much on the major capital city routings, but looking at the opportunities in regional aviation and trying to pick up some of the places that the big players like Qantas and Virgin don't actually fly jets to. More information will come out about the routings that they are taking in the future, but talking about the jets they're flying, you may be wondering then, well, what aircraft are they actually planning to fly? Well, according to their releases and what you can see on the Koala Airlines website, it's the Boeing 737 MAX 8. Now, that's the same aircraft type that Bonza was flying here in Australia when it was trying to also get into the Australian market. And if you're thinking, well, maybe Koala Airlines can use the same aircraft that Bonza had, are they not still here in Australia? Can they not take over the leases? Well, unfortunately, those planes are not physically here anymore because they were flown out of the country back in April and May this year. If you're wondering specifically where they went, Bruce, and yeah, these are the actual names of the aircraft, Bruce went back to Canada, and Bazza, Malk, Shazza, and Sheila have all gone back to France. So those aircraft are not physically here in the country right now. Where Koala Airlines are going to get their 737 MAX 8s from, as I record this, I'm not sure, but that's the aircraft that they're planning to fly here in Australia in the future. So why are the odds stacked against them before they've even started? Well, I've already mentioned two other airlines that have tried and unfortunately weren't successful at flying here in the Australian market, competing against Qantas and Virgin, and that is Rex and Bonza. Rex, which is short for Regional Express, are exactly that. They're a regional carrier here in Australia, flying Saab 340s to some of the smaller regional destinations. But in 2021, they actually tried to add a new layer to their services by operating 737s between some of our major cities like Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. This was a big shift in their business model for Rex, trying to compete against the big players, Virgin and Qantas. But in 2021, coming out of the pandemic, they thought that it could possibly be a good time to try and shake up the Australian market and compete against the two big players. The moment they announced their 737 routes between the major cities, Qantas and Virgin kind of jumped on top of them straight away. For example, Rex introduced $49 fares between Melbourne and Sydney. Virgin matched that with $49 fares, and shortly after that, Jetstar, which is owned by Qantas, actually launched $44 fares. Now, Qantas and Virgin, with their deep pockets, their huge infrastructure, their much bigger fleets than Rex, could afford to do that. Rex, unfortunately, couldn't really afford to respond to that any better. So all of a sudden, we had $49 seats available on three different airline types, and everyone was picking Virgin and Qantas because they were more established. Maybe they had frequent flyer points with the schemes, and Rex was a new player and a bit of an unknown in the jet travel market. Rex even went as far as accusing Qantas practice of capacity dumping, slot hoarding, and moving in on their regional routes to try and squeeze out the competition. And because Rex didn't have those frequent flyer schemes, because they didn't have the lounges in all the airports that Qantas and Virgin already had, because they didn't have that infrastructure to compete on anything other than price, and because price was no longer a competitive point for them, unfortunately Qantas and Virgin just didn't give them any opportunity to get into the market at that time. And despite initially optimistic projections and travellers like me who were really excited to see a new entrant coming onto the market and trying their new fleet and their new services, the airline actually found it really difficult to fill the seats on their 737s. They weren't able to make it a profitable exercise, and unfortunately Rex no longer offers those services here in Australia. Then there's Bonza, who came up with an even more ambitious plan, which wasn't to go for the major city routes, but to focus on underserved regional and leisure routes instead, connecting some of the cities that weren't traditionally served by the big two, Qantas and Virgin. They also introduced new aircraft, the 737 MAX, with its improved fuel efficiency. They thought that could be a point of difference for them with customers in this market as well. However, this being innovative also means it was quite new, and therefore it was untested here in the Australian market, and the Australian market just didn't really need it. The lower than originally expected customer demand, the fuel price volatility that they faced, operational costs which were higher than they originally expected, all of this plus the competitive pressure from the existing big two players here in the market meant that it was a constant struggle for Bonza here in Australia, and ultimately it just wasn't sustainable and they had to stop flying. So what can Koala Airlines learn from Rex and Bonza, and what will they be doing differently here in the Australian market as a result? Well, I think that's exactly what they're working on at the moment, what that core strategy and positioning is going to be. I think we've already proven that you can't really compete purely on price. You can go for the high volume routes between Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, but the moment you drop your prices, it really seems like Qantas and Virgin, with their deep pockets and much bigger fleets, are able to match that as well. So purely going low on price isn't a way to give yourself a massive point of difference. If you then go for the Bonza model and you look at different routes, that's fine, but Australia is massive and our population is quite small, so you've got to be picking underserved routes which still give you enough customers to make those routes profitable. And to be honest, I don't know how many of those are actually out here in Australia at the moment that aren't already being served by Qantas and Virgin. History have shown us that the Australian aviation market is a notoriously difficult one to crack. Ansett Australia, Tiger Air, Rex, Bonza, they've all had slightly different strategies, but ultimately the big two that we still have to this day, Qantas and Virgin, have succeeded where all the others haven't. That dominance of the duopoly that we have here in Australia, combined with the vast distances that these aircraft have to cover, makes it an incredibly difficult market to try and crack. Those large distances as well mean that fuel prices are a lot higher than they would be for maybe an equivalent airline starting in somewhere like Europe, which is traveling over shorter distances. And again, of course, the population being lower means that then some of those aircraft are not being filled as much as they would be in Europe, which is why there are more low-cost airlines, therefore more competition, and a better overall aviation market for the customer. I still think it is a very good thing that we have companies like this making announcements like this, that they are looking to come into this market and try and shake things up away from where things currently stand. We need it, and we need companies like this to be innovative and bring us new solutions for aviation travellers here in Australia. But Koala Airlines are going to have to be very strategic and considered about their growth. They're going to have to really focus on cost management and potentially identify some niches that others haven't to ensure that they are successful against the huge players that we have here in Qantas and Virgin. So will Koala succeed? Well, in my opinion, we don't know yet. There's not enough information about the airline to know exactly what their strategy is, and therefore we can't really give a considered opinion on whether they'll be successful or not. Only time will tell, but the main thing is I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm glad that someone has the courage to stand up and say that they are willing to challenge the two big players. I, for one, wish them well, and it'll be nice not just to see a flying kangaroo at Australian airports in the future. Maybe a flying koala will be a welcome addition too.